Well,
Okay.
listen, great for this, and I'll just set the tone. I'm Will Stabler, your MC for this morning, not to be confused with Michael Campbell. But the whole purpose of today is to really let you know what it is that you're going to be in for the next 10 or 12 weeks on how to use the tool, make you feel very comfortable of how to get value at it right out of the gate. And quite frankly, to thank you, A, for trusting us, and then B, showing you what you can do with that trust. So we're ready to rock and roll. So this is your implementation. This is yours to run. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we present all of the value that you should be getting right out of the gate. There's a lot of user guides. MC will walk you through. Those that work with MC, he's not short on detail. Don't ask him a question because he will get so deep that your head will spin, but it's good. That's why he's here. At the same time, we're excited to make sure that you're ready to utilize the tool in its best way. So um, we put together, you've probably seen Alexandra. I know that Kennedy's seen it, but we've put together a 10-week program that is really scripted. So without your input, we know exactly what we want to cover over the next 10 weeks. But it's yours. So that said, even ad hoc, if there's a question, if you need to go a little bit, take a little detour because something doesn't resonate, stop us. We're more than happy to do that. We'll cover what we need to cover. At the same time, if there's something that occurs to you that's out of scope, bring it up. We can put it in the parking lot and make sure we cover it before the 10 weeks or figure out a way to cover it in another way. So, MK and MC, is there anything as we start this discussion that you want to make sure that you want to cover before we get going?
No, not really. I think we put together a deck which we'll share afterwards, which should give you a great overview of sort of where we're starting. You already have a head start because you're on the platform in at least in the for purposes of the audit. So a lot of the onboarding, which is actually hope you can confirm wasn't all that bad, has been done, right? So you may need to add a user or two or change a role, which you have the ability to do, but of course we can help if need be. Those kinds of things. So we'll cover basically where you're starting out, and then we're going to start with a couple of very high-level picture, sort of concepts that I think will be helpful just so you get a context for where our platform fits and where the work we're going to do over the next 10, 12 weeks will fit as well. And we're definitely going to introduce some terminology that you may not have heard before, but the concepts are probably familiar to you. So there's probably some getting used to on that. But it's all for good reason, I would say. And if you feel differently, don't hold back. Let us know. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share a deck and just get started. Go. Okay. So we like to use the term clinical data operations optimization, knowing that obviously all of you are first and foremost concerned with quality operations, right? But if you've been on the platform or as you get to look at the platform, you'll see that a lot of the feature functionality that is obviously relevant to quality may and should also apply to other use cases going forward. And I know we've had some conversations around that in the run up to this, but and we also had a conversation with Kennedy where we basically said, no, let's make sure we're solid with the quality team, and then once you guys are fully up to speed, then it may be more appropriate and easier to get other departments involved. Right? Okay, so if I can't find my cursor. See, somebody just praised me for being good with one screen, but now I'm struggling with three. Like I said, let's just do a couple things for overview. This basically just sets the context for where a platform sits, but also how we think about FHIR, because everybody talks about FHIR, but there's really two primary sort of thrusts or threads with FHIR that a lot of people get confused. So we just put that on a picture so if we have a baseline basically, right? But what you see here is more or less what data operations looks like for let's say HEDIS, right? You have your data partners that have data sources or charts for that matter, and then that comes over to you somehow, which we would call inbound clinical data, and then sometimes it goes into a centralized repository, and sometimes it goes to something that's specific to quality operations, but eventually goes to the use cases, including quality. Our platform sits completely in the cloud, right? So we have no direct integrations with what you do in-house and or yet with what your data partners do, right? We just sit sort of in the cloud, getting metadata from you that we analyze and then basically, start mapping things out for you. And that's true, as you'll see, for the data operations, but also specifically for your quality operations, your rate files, right? And what's shading right now is effectively all the things that the payer enablement platform does inventory, cover, and maintain. So basically all the analytics, all the things we call channels and opportunities, all that basically falls into that area. Shouldn't say gray area because it's actually pretty transparent. Should probably change that color. What's coming, and something that I think you guys are going to be pretty interested in, is then start leveraging all these FHIR opportunities that your data partners have available, but everybody has done very little. We don't know of a plan that really has done much with that, except for a couple plans that are integrated with Providence in the Pacific Northwest. But that opportunity is getting more and more prevalent because all the providers partners you have to have FHIR APIs, and everybody's doubling down. Certainly, I was at the ASTP conference last week. Everybody's doubling down on driving the standard and driving enforcement of making those APIs available, functional, and provide all the data that is mandated by the rules coming out of Cures Act and others. So one of the goals is obviously to make it very, very easy to access that data and either replace data sources or data channels that are not optimal from your current operations, which we are inventorying and scoring, and or add to that, right? As you'll see, or as you may already know, when it comes to switching to digital quality, there's a big lift in terms of getting additional data. Also capability we support on the platform. So we'll get into all that, not today, but in the course of this program. So FHIR enablement, as we call it, is a big topic, and I think it's gonna be very, very important for plans going forward for two reasons. A, you probably need access to a lot more data where chart review may just not actually work just because of scale, but also where you may not have the budget to do it. Right, and all that again is we analyze on the platform, and then we'll cover in the program going forward. For completeness sake, when we talk to some payers, they go, "Well, we already got FHIR," right? But it's the FHIR server or the FHIR facade that is mandated for payers, which is basically exposing data from your end to somebody else, including patients and your data partners, right? So that is the compliance play, right? Whereas getting data from your data partners, that's where you have opportunity in terms of clinical data operations and use cases like quality and going forward digital quality. So I think it may be helpful, and we'll of course share this picture, and I hope it is helpful to you to sort of set the big context. Where does Velox sit? What does it cover? And how we should think about FHIR in a very high level conceptual in high level conceptual terms. So I'll stop here for a second, see if anybody has questions.
No questions from my end.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a good overview. Thank you.
Of course. All right. So the payer enablement platform sits in the cloud, as we just saw in the previous picture. So we just want to cover very, very quickly what is it and what does it do on a high level conceptual. So it's a cloud platform that has a lot of data that we source from different places, right? It includes the files from you, which are on the left. We'll show you how that works in a second, but also more than anything, we aggregate a lot of data from what we call the clinical data ecosystem, right? So, for example, we interrogate payer APIs to know who's in your network. We interrogate all the endpoint directories to know what all is out there in terms of FHIR endpoints and how they can be addressed and so on and so forth. We benchmark all the customers on our platform so we can benchmark your scores against others. We have scoring models going forward. We're also teaming up with clinical architecture and data quality. So if you've ever heard of the PEP framework, the patient information quality improvement framework, which is becoming a standard, and NCQA is also adopting. I think there's a talk on that at HIMSS with Ed Yurkison, and clinical architecture. That is going to be the standard for measuring data quality. We're incorporating that going forward. And then, other aggregated metadata sets, which basically has a lot to do with NPIs, NPI level 2. So how does a provider relate to a system, relate to an endpoint? All that basically is in the platform, which will then, be useful to you when we overlay your data. So what happens, like I said, and then we also all this enables what we call FHIR enablement, right? So FHIR enablement, one of the goals, and you'll see this in a later slide, is to ensure that you can take advantage of all these FHIR opportunities you have with data partners without having to do all the things that most plans struggle with, which is, build your own tools, hire people who know FHIR and they're experts, and so on and so forth. So all that basically is preempted with FHIR enablement. And then what happens is, and you've already done this in onboarding, we load two types of files that you provide. One is your data channel inventory, which populates our channels, which I'll show you in a second, and then the XML files, which are basically your rate files that we are used in Rate Checker, which you're probably already using in the context of audit and working with your auditor. And then what happens, so all this, the platform basically processes all that in real time, including all the ecosystem data, and then immediately populates a number of dashboards that are always kept current, which then allows you to do the following: actionable insights, tracking the progress, which is always current and always complete. And that's really what we're aiming for when we want to have optimal clinical data operations. So I know this is super high level, but just to get a sense for where your files fit in, what all is on the platform, and sort of, how the dashboards come about. So I'll stop here for a second. Okay. So I'm going to run through this real quick, although you've already done this, but just so for those of you who haven't done the onboarding or haven't been on the platform yet, you kind of know what's going on or what has already happened. So number one, and Michael, maybe you want to talk through this, Michael Campbell, since you actually did the work with Priority.
Yeah, I'll be honest, it was kind of a while ago. I think very often this goes quite smoothly because this is something that we're all right familiar with from doing HEDIS, preparing for your HEDIS audit in the roadmap. And, I think for many years I've desired to just finally keep as best as we can over time, as progressively as we can, move off of spreadsheets. I mean, as MK has noted, I mean, we're moving to a new paradigm of digital data exchange, and yet we're still kind of holding on to these spreadsheets in this old world. And I think it's time to finally start a dispense of that. So we've built configuration both at the organization level, so just kind of like more broadly priority health, but then also at the plan or submission level. Sometimes we use different terminology or related terminology. There's a lot of overlap. It's maybe not 100%. But here we would say the submission. So this is everything that really defines in your XML files, which of course really drive what your rate reviews are for your audit. I don't know, MK, I don't know what the next page is, if you want me to speak to that as well.
You know that one really well.
This one, yeah, this one I know way too well. This is, and I mean, I don't know, because I know Ross is your auditor, and Ross has been really a great advocate for the platform. He's using it with all of his other plans as well. And I think it's starting to really build up 2025 or MY 2025 audit. We really, I think, have got the flywheel going, and people are comfortable with this new paradigm and how we do audits. And this one in particular, we've used for years the data or what we call data source inventory form, where, just more specifically, here's let's say a data store or a vendor, or perhaps like a LabCorp or something. We just identify that as the source. What we've done with the data channel inventory form, or DCIF for short, is we've gotten more granular where we can, because obviously APIs are at a more granular level than what we'd see typically with the vendor. So we have a system here between data sources and data channels where we can still group things by a source, but also get even more specific to the format level. And that's what the data channel inventory form captures, things that metadata that we are, again, it's in aligns with the themes of VLOX, but at the same time, captures some really new critical metadata, in particular about lineage, that helps us to define the complexity of each of these channels. And ultimately, in my opinion, there's a two-pronged reason for that. One is, as auditors, we need to know where the complexity is, because that just speaks to risk. The other part of it is that we need to be able to define, if you're going to allocate resources, to where you're going to upgrade and upscore your channels. We want to address the ones that are let's say the ones adding the most complexity or the most friction or most latency to each of your different data operations. So that's what the data channel inventory actually captures. It also lets us get to the specificity of which plan or which submission is impacted by each of these particular channels. So we really do, through this inventory, capture what is needed in the audit, but we also layer in some additional really useful insights and analytics and potentially benchmarks that we'll be building to help you compare how you're performing as an organization with your clinical data operations versus others. Let's go to the next one. I'm assuming it's the XML file, right? Yeah. And then this is some IP that I had brought into VLOX, because again, I was tired of dealing with spreadsheets and CSV files, and we've got these really perfect XML files that we upload to the IDSS, that we also download to the IDSS. And my feeling is, why are we reinventing the wheel? Why are we creating a different format every year? Let's use these XML files for historical assessments of rates. It's what the file that we used for years with HDC. So there was a nice real mashup of what we were currently using at HDC, but we could add a lot of new enhancements to the rate review process, because now we have persistence of the data on the platform, and we can build benchmarks, and we could add even just color graphics, a lot of new data visualizations that we didn't have before. This also feeds into a couple other things, and I'll state, or maybe I won't take the DQR. I won't mention any of that just yet. MK, we'll just focus on the rate checker, digital quality readiness. We'll come back
very briefly, because
okay, well, all right,
if you don't
just
tell
in general,
them, then I will. So
yeah,
I'm too
the
excited
main
about
thing
it.
the main thing we want to have done here is we really move to a drag and drop. We don't, again, we're trying to start to enforce standard file schemas. This is what the XML has built into it. It's also, incidentally, will feed into NCQA's desire to start doing parallel testing, where we use the existing IDSS version of data, and now I guess we're not a big fan of the terminology, cloned IDSS, but we know that this is where things are going. Even within digital quality measures, XML is very often the payload that's used to be able to report measures. So we have a very easy to use, highly standardized, schema-driven system that allows you to drag and drop your XML files in, and also then feeds into a number of different features like a rate checker. We have a number of different medical record review analytics, as well as digital quality readiness, which will have a component of parallel testing also readily available this year. Yeah.
Okay.
So that collectively, I think on average, we find it takes plans. Most of the lift, of course, is with the DCIF. But the other things, I mean, we clock these in minutes to be completely onboarded with your configuration or your XML uploads.
Right. And just for background, so a lot of us, as you'll see on one of the last slides, so the whole expert team that's available to you have either worked with or at NCQA. Therefore, we have a strong affinity with HEDIS, and also I think a great perspective on digital quality. And so we have features in there, and I'll show you one of them that you unlock with Premium, which is a digital quality readiness assessment. And one of the things that we know going forward is going to be really important is this parallel testing, which, will come up sooner rather than later. And it doesn't matter who your incumbent vendor is and who your new vendor is, even if it's the same one. You will need to do parallel testing, obviously. So we make it super easy to also load the digital quality version of the IDSS output and allow you to validate that, tell your vendor if there's a problem, and or then compare the rates and see if they match, if the denominator is off, and a number of other things. So we basically do full analysis, and that's completely vendor independent. We're realizing that there's a big need for that, and we're starting to have some conversations at NCQA at this point. With new leadership, they may be more open to actually partnering on things like that, which we would very much like to do. But just to, the point here is that you would load that clone file or that file from the digital system all the same. You drop it in because effectively it should match sort of a flag that says I'm the clone. So we're building all that in. So I want to switch over, thanks, Michael, to just giving you a sense of the premium features, assuming that you've seen the others. If not, there's training videos and user guide, and we're happy to sit down with you. Michael can certainly coordinate that. But by the way, Michael runs our services, so he's VP of services. So he's your point person on the engagement, and then he will coordinate with everybody else, depending on what expertise is needed. Just to preempt that. So one of the things that you get is you currently have, or you've had, access to a partial dashboard with not all the KPIs actually visible. So those are now all visible to you. ROI is coming soon. We'll have that conversation a few weeks out because we're just about to, I think we're finally ready to release the ROI model into a beta. So we're going to be asking you if you're interested to have, if you have bandwidth to work with us on ROI. But effectively, complexity score, for those of you who haven't been on there, is a key indicator of just, how suboptimal your clinical data operations are. And so this is on a scale from 0 to 10. So the more red, the more bad, to use bad English. And then opportunity score is effectively, well, what can you do about that? How can you optimize against that or beyond that, right? And then on the right, if you ever seen our marketing, our green donut, that basically gives you a snapshot view of the formats of your current and potential data channels. And as we say, you're done with this platform when the donut is completely green, and it's all real-time standards-based fire, right? So nobody's obviously there. So don't feel bad if you have no green or just a little green. That's completely normal at this point, right? And then, feel free to dig in or, ask us about all these other KPIs. But, this is just to show you the screen, not necessarily to teach you all about it. So I'm just going to build this out. Then data channels. So if you have been on the platform before, you had access to the quality view, which is obviously used primarily in the context of audit. And Michael, I don't know if you want to add anything here, but CDEX view is obviously where we use the KPIs that go more towards the clinical data operations side and not so much the audit or quality specific features of the channel, right? Michael, you want to add anything here?
Well, this is CDEX view, so that's this is the area that I don't typically look at until now. Now that you guys are officially premium, you now have access to this. So if you've been in the platform off and on for your audit engagement with Ross, we would encourage you to go back in again and start to click through some of these pages like this CDEX view, because you would have seen before this was disabled. Now you have access to it. So that's a good starting point for you, is to not just to see the channel, but anytime you click on that data channel where you see that red highlight, it will enable and open up another screen with additional data. But the specifics about how that complexity score and opportunity score was calculated based on some of the input metadata that's captured on the DSIF. The other part,
I'm actually showing your data right now. So also side note, Velox users have the ability to see your data, but not change your data, just so you know that, right? So when you need support or when you work with somebody in a consulting or in this current engagement, You know, we can always look at your data and have a meaningful conversation about it, but you never have to worry that we're going to screw something up. We're not allowed to do anything with your data. This is your data, and you know, your roles as they're authorized get to actually manipulate the data. So just as a side note, the other thing that's not on the screenshot is actually we've added the show retire channels. So, you know, there's obviously over time, you may have data channels that you're not using anymore, but you want to potentially go, well, whatever happened to that thing, right? So I don't know if you have any. My guess is no, but we can check real quick. But again, I'm doing what I'm afraid of, which is I'm already geeking out again, right? But just so you know, your data is already there, and you know, the toggle up here between quality view and CDEX view is basically now should be all active for you guys as well, right? And each row, the rows are all the same, right? It's just what data we show that is different here. So, okay, enough of that. Next is a detail screen under that. I'm going to skip over that. And then what also is now unlocked is what we call the opportunities, right? So effectively, opportunities are either structured data sources that are available from in-network providers based on what we've been able to find in the ecosystem that you have not yet built a data relationship with, again, based on your inventory. So those have no new symbol. Those have a new symbol, sorry. Or if there's a way to improve on something you have based on how we've scored it, then you know it would basically be what we call a replacement opportunity, right? And again, you know, you see the opportunity score on the replacements are typically lower than on the replacements or on the new ones, simply because you know your existing ones rarely have a complexity score of 10, and that's sort of our baseline for new, right? But very, very quickly we'll be able to work with you on, you know, prioritizing those so we can sort and filter and all those things on, you know, how many members are attached to it and so on and so forth. Also, we're adding some other data fields here. We're explicitly flagging who's in and out of network. We are also showing how many what's called practitioner counts, or how many NPI level 1s are associated with that group, which gives you an indication of their size vis-a-vis, you know, the number of members you have at that plan, so that, or at that provider, which may be a good indicator also for, you know, where this may go. But, you know, all that is basically here. The key with the member counts, which actually you guys have done, I think, a really good job providing already, is helpful because the weighted score is really more meaningful than the unweighted score. And in this case, there's not a whole lot of difference. But the idea is that weighted scores take into account how many members are attached to a channel, right? If you have a channel where you have 3 members, data, there's not much to optimize. If it's 10% of your membership, then obviously the impact is going to be much bigger, both in the positive and the negative. So that's how we're thinking about weighted scores. And then I'm just going to build this out. The other new feature, or the other feature that got unlocked, is what we call the digital quality readiness dashboard. And I'm going to throw this back to Michael.
Okay. Yeah, as MK noted, I mean, there's a number of different factors that we're really approaching, and this is really perfectly aligned with where NCQA is going in general with their prioritizations around how we transition to digital quality. And one of them is, of course, understanding your data channels, understanding your data sources. And obviously we have that really locked down with everything we're doing with the DCIF on both the CDEX side as well as the quality side. The other part of it is just understanding this evolution as we move away from this dependency on retrospective medical record review or hybrid, and what are the implications of that, and what's the impact of that as you're moving forward. And what we've, of course, I mean, maybe I think everybody's more or less kind of apprised of what the dynamics are, is that we're moving from being, okay, you're going to be focusing on a sample of 411 for each of your different hybrid measures across each of your different populations, to that's no longer an option. So you have 2 approaches. You either scale out your budget and start to spend a lot more money on prospective builds. So you're not doing 411 anymore. Now you're doing 7,000. And that's just basically keeping the wheels on something that's no longer really scalable. Or you start exploring what are other sources that are out there, and where can we prioritize? Because obviously everything's got to have an ROI attached to it. What the DQR dashboard allows us to do is look at how you're performing at the whole level of priority health, like how ready are you based on the implications of this transition away from hybrid? And then where are you with each of the plans under priority health? And even more so, where are you with each specific measure under each of those particular plans? And what you see is we look at this from many approaches. One is the readiness score, and that's an assessment at the org, plan, or measure level. How ready is that particular org, plan, or measure? In the sense of, if we were to all of a sudden suddenly retire hybrid right now, how ready are you? Are you going to be able to accommodate that change quickly? You'll see in this example, we also have a rate modeling waterfall, which is this really starts to assess the main sources of data that you're using for measures. So your administrative claims, there's your supplemental data, and there's your medical record review. And what we do is start to deconstruct that at the sample level and then rebuild it at the EP, or eligible population level. And that ultimately gets us to what we call here the rate gap, or the rate parity shortfall, where you see in this example here, you have a large rate parity shortfall, meaning that to get to where you were before, this is the gap you need to make up. And obviously, what we're enabling is you to explore these other channels, these other venues of data that are structured and preferably standards-based, like FHIR, to be able to close that gap more cost effectively. And then you'll see also we have here the cost impact. So where you may be able to spend several hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, and we've seen this more, to keep things in the status quo. You're just scaling out hybrid review, retrospective to prospective, or you can see actually you will have cost savings as you move towards more structured supplemental data, and ultimately the end goal in all this, and that's what the green donut as well represents, is FHIR. So that's what this dashboard gives you, is a drill downs at a number of different points in your operations to see which measures are most vulnerable, which ones are soonest going to retire because of the retirement schedule that NCQA put forward. And so there's a lot of things you can do, again, at this level, both high level and at drill down.
Michael, we have a
Alexandria?
question.
Yeah.
Yes, Alexandria.
Yeah, just a quick, this is great. I think that's definitely some information that we're going to be drilling into a little bit more. The cost impact section of this, can you explain that just a little bit more as far as like what those numbers actually represent? So like we're looking at ours and it says MRR 9 million, like what does that truly represent in this screenshot?
Yeah, I'll
Yes.
take that. So
Sure.
what we're doing, and actually, if you're on the platform, hover over the I next to cost impact, because it will tell you if you're using our generic cost factors or already values that you may have changed. But we allow you to configure your actual costs. And what we're modeling is basically, we're saying, based on those costs, we're saying if you want to make up that data gap with all chart review, the MRR cost would be what you expect to pay extra. If you do NLP AI, typically that would be lower, but still probably significant because you still need to get the charts. Structured is effectively all supplemental, no chart review, right? And then FHIR, because we have reason to believe, and we're starting to see with some of our customers, that if they do FHIR and follow some of the best practices we recommend, i.e. right into the contract that you should have access to the API for free, just like you get charts for free, then obviously that might be even less expensive, and therefore you might actually save money. But again, it should play out with the numbers that you can add in terms of what is your cost. And again, this is certainly an exercise we can do together, and they can then change and play with that all you want. But that's basically what that does. Will?
That's great. Yeah.
And a quick add that you may want to do that MK alluded to, we can work with you, Alexander and team, to get really granular on your costs. Some actuaries like to put the exact one. Directionally, it's always right. We use industry standard, so directionally you'll get a good feel. But if you want to really plug in your unit cost, without a doubt, it'd be much more accurate. And then second, as this progresses, the more granularity you'll do, the better it will show across the enterprise. So I encourage you to do that, but you don't have to. These can be your
Yeah.
numbers, they can be our plugged-in numbers, but both directionally will give you a really clear picture. So
Yeah, programming note, we're actually gonna be presenting in the NCQA series, the expert series for digital quality in April, early April. I
Okay.
believe, Margaret, you may know the date, either the 3rd or the 9th. I always get those two
April
confused.
9th. Yeah,
So
April 9th.
we'll not obviously plug Velox outright, but we will talk about these best practices, and we'll also then talk about, I think we'll have a screenshot of the feature for parallel testing and a number of other things, right? Because this is really primarily at this point around data readiness for the hybrid phase out. But then there's obviously the other things that need to happen by 2030 to go all digital. And we're starting to add some of those capabilities, and parallel testing is one of them. But again, the parallel testing, the XML file, like we said earlier, is all the same, and the load capability and the validation capabilities are already there. So, all that will basically be added to the platform when it's ready. Yep.
So for the reason I'm asking so many questions around this is obviously because anytime we're looking to do a large project, whether it's like conversion over to Fire or any one of these things, right? That any responsible company is going to want to know what the ROI is, right? So this is helpful to be able to say, like, if we need to go ahead and make these moves because we can't afford and don't want to spend $9 million
Right.
on medical
Yeah.
record review. So this is helpful. The Fire piece specifically, is that looking at like resources to convert to Fire? Like, what does that represent in this square?
So in the context of digital quality, there's sort of two fire topics. One is the digital quality, the CQL engine or the CQL logic uses the Fire data model. So before the data goes to your new reporting system, it needs to be in Fire. Doesn't mean it needs to come from the source in Fire, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you can get it from the source in Fire, that's probably a good thing. A, it's real time. B, it's standards based. C, it's probably cheaper depending on what your arrangement is. And then you don't need to convert and to basic before you actually feed it into your digital quality or into your reporting system, right? So over time, sourcing the data in Fire is obviously, I think that's where everything's going. We're convinced of that. But in the short term, you can't just switch everything over. Even 2030 is tight, in my opinion. But and then we actually track something on the internal. On the internal, we track, do you have capabilities to do just-in-time Fire conversion? So you may get, a non-standard supplemental. Eventually, it needs to be Fire before you actually, and maybe even your vendor may do it for you, right? But the key is that, if you don't have all Fire from the source, which is very unlikely, then you need a capability somewhere to convert it into Fire eventually. Right. So those are sort of the two parts of the Fire conversation, or the two big parts of the Fire conversation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. And we're happy to dig way, way deep into all that. By the way, I did write what's called the Digital Quality Transition Playbook for NCQA. They still haven't released it yet. We plowed a lot of that into a digital quality 101 course that is available by NCQA. I'm plugging it. I'm not making money off of it, just to be clear. But we also can cover a lot of that stuff in the course of our engagement here, because digital quality is clearly something we want to cover and get really deep with you guys.
And we encourage
That'd be
that. That's
great.
part of. Yeah, I'll just add, we encourage that. Take advantage of this team. It truly is a dream team. So there's not a question you shouldn't ask this team. So
yeah,
awesome. Well, great. We've got plenty of them. That's perfect.
Yeah. No, we love it because we all can get better together.
Yeah.
Especially
do
in
they
digital
have
quality.
a time frame for releasing your playbook?
Well, it's NCQA's playbook. The good news is most of the things in the playbook are actually not NCQA proprietary, and we kind of assembled a lot of it. So a lot of the concepts and slides and all that, in part, they're actually in the platform. They're baked in, and for the most part, we can share those as they become relevant for the conversation.
You'll be ahead of the class, Alexander. You'll be way ahead of the class.
Cool.
Yeah. But then again, if they do release it, I ask every month. I do. So we'll see.
And
Okay,
I'll go back real
I think-
quickly. One
yeah.
half second, Michael. I would also encourage you. I know the relationship with the proprietors, with the providers that you have, but I do encourage that even though it's left hand, right pocket, you're in each other's pockets all the time. I'd look at the contracts. There's slippage there. Everybody likes to put a little bit in for their cost center. So even though it shouldn't happen, I see it the most egregious amounts that go from left pocket to right pocket. So as we get granular here, pay attention to your costs because that's where some of this will slip, and we're happy to walk you through that as well. 'Cause we
Yeah,
see it a lot.
and I know I forget the name of the department, Kennedy, that does VBC, but I think once we're sort of up and running with your team, that is probably the next one over, so to speak, and that's also very relevant to Alexander, what you brought up around ROI, because we don't have a lot of hard data around this, but I've been talking with NCQA about this for years. I said, look, I know that digital quality has a lot of advantages, and obviously we want to go there, but all the investments may not pay for itself by digital quality, but the same data, the same quality, the same speed is going to be useful for a number of other use cases. Risk adjustment obviously comes to mind. And if they then also get to take advantage of that and share the cost, and then another use case, gap closure and whatever, right, care coordination, then all of a sudden the investment has a positive ROI. And I think that may come up, but that's why the sort of the broader ROI exercise that we're going to start in a few weeks might be really important to you guys as well, right? Okay, so I'm gonna keep things moving. I know we like talking about all this stuff. So the last new big feature is what we call fire enablement. So fire enablement, you may remember on the first big diagram, is making it really easy for plants to access the fire resources on the other side, so to speak, which we identify as opportunities, and/or you may be aware of them. But the idea is that it's easy to deploy. It would be deployed to you because we do not touch PHI. We think that it is best practice for the ultimate user of the data, in this case, the plant, to get the data straight from the source, i.e. the provider, which has a Fire API in this case. So we're enabling that. We parameterize it from the platform. We make sure that it runs properly and all those things. And we also make sure it integrates with your existing workflows or your clinical data repository. So that's a conversation a few weeks down the road. But once we're sort of solid on opportunities and fire and all those concepts, then I think this is a conversation that our customers are all seem to be quite excited about and can't wait. There's a diagram for that. I'm not going to walk you through that, but feel free to geek out. Again, happy to explain it at some point. And then so. Any questions on what we covered a lot, obviously, but we just wanted to give you a sense of what's now available to you since we flipped the switch, so to speak, before we get into the planning. We're not going to get all the planning done today, but we'll share all the things that we want to line up here. Right?
And we probably need to schedule, Kennedy. We need to figure out when the meeting should happen. We need your help to schedule, how those are the next several weeks with you. So let us know how to do that as well, housekeeping wise.
Yeah,
so,
I can reach out to Margaret to facilitate times that work for our team.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and then we'll definitely have the time to give you a good sense of what's going to happen over the next, we say 10 weeks, but if we get it done in 12, no problem on our side, of course, right? And also, while we want to, at some point, 10, 12 weeks out, we sort of finish our formal program, our experts are available to you while you're a subscriber, just to be clear, right? So if you go like, I really want to talk to Michael Barr for half an hour, no problem. We'll schedule it, kind of thing, right? So just be aware that our experts are available to you going forward as well. Okay. So here's a high level plan. So onboarding's done, great. Kickoff today, good. We'll probably schedule some time where Michael will walk you guys through the premium features. Again, feel free to play around. I don't think you can do any damage there, whatever. And get familiar as much as you want. You also have the user guide in the documentation repository, I believe. But we'll schedule some time where minimally we can answer questions and or give you a walkthrough of all the features that just have been unlocked. And then we get into, and this may bleed a little bit into new terminology, but channels and audit support. So again, this is what Michael does all day long, I want to say. But channels and audit support go together for how you've been using the platform before, right? So if you have questions on that, or we can cover it in the weekly status calls. If you go like, our auditor did this or whatever, but it sounds like you have a great auditor or anyways. But again, that's available. But also in terms of channels, Michael will probably take a deeper look at all the parameters in the channels and say, hey, are you sure about this? Or you might say, hey, we really didn't think this through on how many hops this really is. We probably want to change the number of hops or transformations or something like that, or consolidating or breaking out channels. All that is basically falls in that category. And then there's what we call internal opportunities, which is all about how you handle data once it arrives at your organization, right? There's an internal score, and there's also an external score. The internal score, obviously, you're in control of. You can do internally within, your organizational constraints. You can fix a lot of those things. And that also may go to ROI and how other use cases will be able to leverage that data. External, we will treat somewhat separately. That's obviously has a lot to do with what's available from your network partners and potentially beyond. And that also includes an exercise, and Michael, help me out if that's already been done. I'm just not aware. We're probably going to ask you to give us a count of a unique member count from, say, last year, calendar year 25, from claims. So we can, by NPI level 2, so we can overlay that. And again, I think in your channels, a lot of the member counts look pretty accurate already. But we can then also see who's not in network that might be relevant to consider an opportunity for, right? And you probably know this if you have out-of-network providers where you have significant member counts with encounters. But that is the kind of exercise we want to do in that context. Digital quality readiness we talked about. So this is obviously all about being ready for hybrid phase out initially, and then some of the other things that come down the line. But expect that this goes beyond just what's on the platform. But really, we want, as of April, we want everybody, including NCQA, to be crystal clear on all the things that need to happen for everybody to be 100% digital by 2030, right? And we are pretentious enough to believe we have that answer, and we have that roadmap, right? Fire enablement, like we said. So once the external opportunities are sorted out and we know really how to prioritize them, then we can start talking about fire enablement. And Kennedy, this is probably where you may want to have your VBC folks start to get involved, right? And then we'll basically wrap it up with 2 rounds of CDEX optimization. So basically say all the things we've learned and all the things that the platform tells us, here's what we all agree you should be doing going forward, along the lines of optimizing everything, including cost and digital quality and scores and everything, right? Okay, so real quick, these are the people that are available to you. So Michael and I will probably do most of the work sort of in the course of the engagement we just outlined. right, with help from our data ops team. And, Will actually can assist with business cases, ROI type conversations. Will has spent a lot of time around risk adjustment, for example, revenue cycle. So if these use cases become a topic, we may pull in Will. And then the other two gentlemen, some of you may be familiar with. So Rick Moore and Michael Barr are also co-founders. Michael Barr was basically the number 2 to Peggy for 6 years at NCQA until 2021. He's the executive VP in charge of measure development, among other things. And that's basically under his leadership, the digital quality movement actually started at NCQA. And then Rick Moore was their CIO and CISO for 14 years. So Rick was basically on the other side of IDSS and a lot of other things. So he got them to almost 200 million members on the HEDIS reporting. So very fortunate to have that team. And again, however you feel, they could be useful, schedule some time with them or say, hey, I have a question about X, who should I talk to, basically, right? We also have other industry connections in case we can't answer a question, but I think this team is a great starting point, has been so far, right? Okay, so next steps, basically a different view at the previous table. The first thing we should schedule are weekly status meetings where we can sort of catch up on everything. So that is obviously a weekly repeating meeting. Premium features training, we want to start fairly soon, I suppose, right? And then we'll schedule a lot of these other activities, which roughly go with, all the major goals and sort of activities we've outlined previously, but just being more discreet. We can certainly schedule additional things, extend things or extend activities. We call some things workshops. We may go, 2 hours is not enough. Let's schedule 3, or we're not done after 2 and we schedule a follow-on. All these things obviously are just to be sorted out, right? And then you see at the end, we basically have the optimization roadmap. So everything we've collected by about week 9, we're gonna collect and put together comprehensively. We'll look through it as a group. We'll then revise that and then do a final review and say, okay, so we should have a really comprehensive plan for you guys to effectively fly solo. But again, if we're around, sort of thing, right? So that's what we wanted to share today.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate your time in going through these slides. I'll work with Margaret to kind of work on both the continuous weekly status meeting as well as each of these other activities you have outlined here. I know I'm excited to see that we've got everything unlocked, so I have a feeling our team will start to dig through that, and very much look forward to coming meetings and some questions that I'm sure will
Awesome.
start to
Yeah.
form.
Same. Yeah. And again, the platform is very stable, I have to say, and it's fairly mature. But if something's not clear, if you go like, I wish it did this, or I wish it did that, we're not promising anything, but we'll definitely listen.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay.
But don't be
All right.
afraid. Poke around, Kennedy. I think you'll like what you see, and I think it'll also spur your activity in terms of where you want to go, and that's where we need your help. We don't know unless you ask. So let us know what strikes your interest and what is something of important to you.
Perfect. Yeah, you guys have been great partners thus far, and I'm excited to keep moving forward.
Us too. Good stuff. Appreciate
Very
all
cool.
of you.
All right.
I
Thanks
wish you
all.
warm weather, Kennedy. I hope the weather stays warm.
Thanks. I actually think it just started to snow here, so
How timely my well wishes.
yeah, exactly.
But snow doesn't necessarily mean that cold, right? You could get
Yes,
much
true.
colder than that.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
There you go. Well, happy weekend, everybody.
Yes, you guys as well.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you so much.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.